own garden. Okay, so we can make a difference in our own gardens. As I say, we can't leave it to councils. They can only put one tree in the nature strip, and if we look around our gardens, you'll find places where you'll be able to fit trees and shrubs and so forth. And the average size, even a small block, can fit 3 to 5 dwarf, small growing trees or large shrubs. Which can make a significant difference. So have a look around. That's the first step, to try and get some shade. The thing is, on an ambient temperature of a 43-degree day, the surface temperature at soil, if it's not covered, and pavement can be significantly hotter than that. And sometimes, in my instance, when I've tested these with a digital thermometer, they can be 65 degrees Celsius. I know the image says 50, but it's certainly much hotter than that. And then in the partial shade, near buildings where they might have a small roof or something, you're getting a much lesser temperature. But with the trees, it's significantly different. So on that same sort of day, you can get 20 or 30 degrees difference in the shade. So again, I'm going to please remind you to mute yourselves. I'm hearing background noise while I'm presenting, so please, if you can do that. Plants really do, not only do they help filter sunlight out and stop that ultraviolet heat from warming things up, but they also, they trap pollutants and so forth, and they clean the air for us. So, it's a byproduct of that photosynthesizing that they do using the sun's energy, and the CO2 in the air to create food for themselves. And of course, the more of them we have, the more carbon gets pulled out of the atmosphere and stored in soil, which I think a lot of us tend to forget. Now, this is the prime example. This is my place. This is my front yard. And whilst I haven't got a big tree canopy, and like I said before, there's one tree in the nature strip we're very close to, which is casting quite a lot of shade over my garden, and yet I'm still able to grow fruit trees. Now, there's 3 apple trees and 2 olive trees, the ones between the ones with the frames of the olive trees. But this is facing northwest, so it gets all of the hot afternoon sun. And as the sun sets lower in the afternoon, these trees shade the front of my house, and it stops it from getting really hot. And it's remarkable the difference that it makes. To give you an idea, on the right-hand side, as you can see, is my next-door neighbour, and I hope they're not online, but at the end of the day, there's no trees or shrubs covering their place. On the left-hand side, you can see when I zoom in, that's actually got no garden in it at all. So you can imagine how hot that gets, and yet when you look at my place, you can see the amount of shade that these trees and shrubs are casting, and yet they're not terribly big. So, and it's also cooling the garden. It's not just the house that this is helping with. And of course, the less amount of that ultraviolet rays or hot direct sunlight that you're getting on soil, the less chance you are of having rapid evaporation. And I have to say that the more evaporation that takes place at soil level, the more compact your soil becomes. You have to understand that 50% of healthy soil is made up of air and water, 25% of equal parts of that. So if you've got no air, or no water, should I say, and that's being evaporated out, now you've got no air in there either. And this is where compaction starts in. So it's vitally important that you look as best you can to try and shade where you can on your houses. Here's another prime example: a hedge, and it's a lavender hedge that adequately helps cool down the property. It's remarkable what greenery does, for just cooling down those hot surfaces. Even walking barefoot on the footpath, because it's shaded, doesn't burn the soles of your feet. And again, I'm sure everyone's done it. I've done it 100 times. When you've walked out without shoes on and you've stepped onto something that's extremely hot, it's not much fun. So, and of course, this heat that gets trapped in these surfaces, paving, brickwork and so forth, even front fences, can be enough to radiate heaps and heaps of that heat that then starts to dry out not only the plants but the soil as well with it. So it really is important to have a look and see what you can do, or where you may be able to grow something a little differently. Maybe it is a shrub, maybe it is a small tree, that might help shade that wall or part of your garden that's been hammered by the hot sun, particularly the sunlight that we've had just recently. This is a drone view of my house. And as you can see on the right-hand side is the front yard that we just discussed. But this is the front bottom right-hand corner of the house is northwest. So this is the hot side of the house, hence why the solar panels. But what I want to draw your attention to is down the long side, we've put in a pergola. And it has no roof on it, but we have strained wires across the top and then run some 4-inch square or 100 mil square mesh, protection mesh, so that if someone was to walk up there, they wouldn't fall through. But more importantly, what it's there for is to hold what I've grown over the top of it. What I've done is I've planted a dozen grapes down the sideway. Now, this is 12 months ago. And the grapes they'd only been planted that year, but as you can see, they've made their way up onto the top of the pergola without the roof. And as you can see, they've got the wires there. But this year I put the mesh over the top. And it's remarkable how much they grow. You think, oh, this is going to take ages for this to take effect. And let me tell you what the thinking is behind this, and it really has done a great job, is that not only do we get the benefit of the grapes, and I might add, I put in 6 table grapes and 6 wine grapes. So we're going to have a bit of a go at growing wine down the track. But more to the point, being deciduous vines, they lose their leaves. So over the summer months, we get the benefit of the shade that the leaves and the vines provide. We get the vine leaves to actually make dolmades. It's just something that we like, stuffed vine leaves. And then, of course, we get the grapes from them. And then in the winter months, particularly from autumn onwards, we get the benefit of the leaves falling down onto the garden, and we rake those up and we compost those. So that ultimately winds up into the compost, and we get the warm winter sun back in to warm the house back up. Now, as you can see in the right-hand picture here, I've got an air conditioner, and we've hardly had to turn that on this year. And you can see why. This is this year. And the grapes have done a really, really good job, and they've grown all the way down that long side. Now, next year, this will be, and we have had grapes this year, not a heap, but certainly we've had the protection from the sun, and that's really what we're looking for. Now, ordinarily, you get out there in the mid-afternoon sun on the days like we've had in this last 5 days, you wouldn't be out there for very long, I assure you, because the brick wall would have heated up, and radiating that heat, it's just stifling when you walk out there. And I was able to comfortably walk around there with no shoes and socks on, and potter about. I mean, it was hot, don't get me wrong, but nothing like it was. So it's done a great job of us not having now to turn on the air conditioners. And the other thing that it's done is that it's stopped us having to water anywhere near as much as we were before, because we're not getting anywhere near the amount of evaporation that we were getting prior to us going down this path. Now, not necessarily for everyone, but, it might be some answers that you can string together that might do this for you. But I'm just showing you, I'm planting some seeds here for you to think a bit differently about, where you live. And this is the blind side of the house. It's the narrower side of the house, and yet we're able to utilise this very, very wisely and still be able to grow productive plants down here, even with the trials and tribulations you get through the heat over the summer months. So shade is not the enemy, I've got to say. I mean, and I think that people sometimes think, I don't want to shade too much of the garden because it won't grow the things that I might want to grow. Well, these are dwarf beans that are grown underneath a fruit tree. And it's remarkable once you do start to shade things just how well they grow, because they're not being beaten up by the sun. This is on the south side of the house. So this is the opposite side of the one we just looked at where the grapes are. So this is the south wall, and this only gets sun up until about 12 o'clock. Now, I'm able to grow tomatoes and basil and all sorts of things down the sideway of this house without any problem at all. And in fact, we get far better yields out of these tomatoes than the ones that are grown out in the sun. So, wide leaf plants love the cover of shade, and that's why they have wide leaves. They filter sunlight through the treetops. So these are good plants to think about growing in the shaded areas, and the thinner, more narrower leaved plants like more sun. Things like dill and fennel and the onion family and so forth, they like more sun. So this is broccoli on the same side. Who would have thought growing broccoli in the shade? But here you are. It's remarkable what you can do. The other thing I tend to do a lot of when it comes to gardening and trying to heat proof it is I plant it fairly densely. I don't want to have too much soil or even mulch exposed to any sunlight if you can possibly help it. Let the plants do the hard work, and they will build their own condensation. And in fact, overnight you'll find that the dew point builds, and they tend to nearly water themselves. I mean, you still got to water them, obviously, but nowhere near the amount that you would if you only had a plant, every sort of half a square metre. If you look on this photo on the left-hand side, in 1 square metre, I've probably got close on a dozen plants. So when you zoom in, I mean, there's garlic and all sorts of things going on in there, lettuces and lobelia, and as I say, garlic. There's even some white viola, lobelias back toward the back, and so on. So, don't be frightened of planting some stuff that have wide leaves. So that covers things like kale, broccoli, cauliflower, silver beet, lettuce, tomatoes is a prime example, cabbage, bok choy, all of the Asian greens. They will do well even at this time of year when it's quite hot. And if you got them in the sun, they would bolt and go to seed. Grow them in the shade, you'll be gobsmacked at how well they do. Think about tree yields, and I mentioned this briefly before. Trees don't grow by themselves in their natural habitat. They rely on understories. So if we can mimic nature a little better than we have, instead of just plonking one tree in the ground and don't grow anything near it because it won't do so well, that's rubbish. Fill the plants up underneath the trees. You'll be gobsmacked, as I say, that how that works. And what I try and do, and because each leaf on a plant is like a solar panel, again, it draws down the sun's energy and the CO2, makes food for itself, and it transfers that food, make about 40% more food than they need, and they feed that out into the microbes in the soil. And of course, some of that gets stored as stable carbon. So what I try and do is I try and maximise the leaf layer that I have in my garden. So I look for a ground cover, and then I look for the next level up, which might be small annual plants, and then I might look for perennial plants that might grow a little bit taller at the back of those. And I try and get some of these underneath the trees so that the trees get the benefit of the multi-species grown beneath them. And that's what happens naturally in a forest. I mean, there is a symbiotic relationship between different plants, and they intermingle with their roots, and they share the resources that the microbes make available to the plants. And what happens is that you start to build a thing called humus. And humus has a huge water holding capacity in soil, which I'll come to a bit further in the presentation, but you want more of it. And unfortunately, globally, we've lost about 2/3 of humus that once used to be in soil. It should be about 5% of soil, and it's now down to 1.5%. We think here in Australia that it's possibly even less than that, because we're on an ancient land that really didn't freeze over in the Ice Age. And of course, the soil was exposed to the elements for far longer than elsewhere, and the humus has been depleted. We've got a very thin veil of topsoil on the land we live. So it's really all we can do to build more of that, the better off we will be, your pocket will be, because you're not spending a fortune on water, because water has now become a valuable substance. I mean, every time you turn the tap on, the meter is ticking, So, and this is what I'm talking about, trying to build that level. You don't want to get them right up underneath, right up close to the trunk, but certainly around the drip line of the tree where, you're going to get the benefit. And if you're growing fruit trees like I am, this is an apple tree that's in the middle of the shot. I'm growing flowering plants beneath it. There's lemon balm, there's borage, there's also some kale, some silver beet, and so on. I've even got a little bird bath there behind the kale for the birds on a hot day. Oh, you can see it in the left-hand picture. There's even some walking onions in the left-hand picture. I'll try and blow that up. Those onions just past the alyssum there. So this is what I'm trying to say. If you build up fill up the garden, plant fairly densely, and what will happen is that it'll not only shade the soil and keep the soil more moist than it would be. Otherwise, overnight they'll build that bigger dew point, and they'll nearly water themselves, which is quite fantastic. Even making sure you mulch. Mulch is the most important thing you can do for your gardens. If you're not mulching, look, you're nowhere really. I mean, what happens is we get a heat bowl effect. and you know, all that moisture at soil level gets evaporated out, and up it goes up in the atmosphere, evaporated into water vapor, and it gets replaced with cool air, and that gets heated up and evaporated, and so it goes. It becomes a heat bowl effect. So plant densely and fill up your garden as full as you can get it without being ridiculous. You know, and if you're planting something every day or every second day, as I like to try and convince people to do, you know, pull out a weed and put in a plant in its place, filling up where the weed was, and you'll basically outcompete the weeds. You'll be filling up your garden not only for something to eat potentially, but it could also be ornamental. It doesn't have to be edible, but it is going to start and make sure that you are starting to counteract that heat by the plant being able to absorb the sun and convert it into food and so forth. You know, so again, even around a little tree in the front. This is a Jonathan apple in the nature strip, and I've planted a heap of nasturtiums around the base of it, not only for the benefit that they give the apple tree in terms of the symbiotic relationship, but it's more about keeping the sun off, you know, the graft and where the soil is exposed. So, as I say, it is quite remarkable. The mulch layer is vitally important, and the more you can get, and this isn't about having a deep, thick mulch layer. Gone are the days where you would put a mulch layer of 100, 150 millimetres or 4 to 6 inches deep. That's craziness. What will happen is if you do that, when you go out there to water, you will only get the mulch layer wet and nothing will make it to the soil. You really need, and the soil needs to breathe just as much as the mulch does. So, you know, I urge you to, if you've got mulch layers that thick, get them back down to about 20 to 25 millimetres. About an inch in the old scale is as much mulch as you need. And that is vitally important. The other thing you don't want to do is by monocropping or monoculture planting, growing the same species all together, particularly productive gardens. This is a degenerative method in soil. It degenerates the health of the soil. It depletes the humus. It puts everything into competition for the same nutrients, water, sunlight, etc. And more importantly, when you're growing plants like this, you know, in a multi-species fashion, a polyculture fashion, that's a regenerative approach. And what happens is we find that the microbial population explode in soil. And of course, the more microbes you have, the more resilient plants you will get out of it, because they're able to build and respond well to things like drought resistance. They build better frost tolerance. So you get the extremes, and without, you don't get that in the monoculture scenario. Plants are weakened by growing them that way. We didn't know that up until just recently. In the last sort of 10 years, it's starting to come to light that we've had a lot of that sort of, that way of, that method of thinking wrong. And the relationship between living plants, roots, and what's going on in soil is where we're going to get the very best results. And being mindful of the fact that when you plant multi-species plants together, they actually help one another, particularly the microbes help both the plants and the soil along at the same time. And the more resilience you can get into your plants, the more nutrient density you can build into them. They are more resistant to things, as I say, like drought and or frost, so the extremes of weather. And more importantly, they also build resistance to pest and disease attack at the same time. So it's very, very important that we understand that. This is a slide that I slipped in. I mean, edible gardens, and it's my forte, so I tend to bang on about it a little bit. I mean, I think that, you know, a productive garden and an edible garden, you know, they can be both the same. They can be productive and attractive all at the same time. And I think that people lose sight of that. They think that they need, you know, a vegetable garden to grow food. And I'm here to tell you, you don't. As you saw in my front yard, pretty well everything out there. I mean, there are some ornamental plants out there, but most of it are all edible. And yet to stand back and look at it, you wouldn't believe it. And in here is the same sort of scenario. You know, sunflowers and echinacea and all sorts. I have daffodils and gladioli and the like in amongst my gardens, but the majority of it is productive and planting quite densely, as I say, helps the whole shooting match. So it really is very important. I mean, it goes to show you just what can be done if you put your mind to it. When you are watering, don't be frightened to water in the middle of the day. If plants are wilting, it's an old tale that plants are going to get burnt by watering. I've worked in plant nurseries, both wholesale and retail, all my life. And if we didn't water in the middle of the day when plants are wilting, you would have nothing to buy from us. The likes of Bunnings shelves would be bare because those plants would die. And if you're getting burnt plants from these extreme hot heat days, I can tell you that they have been burnt because they've not been hydrated. And I'm not talking about watering the soil. Sure, long, slow, deep watering first thing in the morning is ideal, but not everyone can do that. But it's a great way of being able to bank some resilience in the soil. But during the course of the day, no amount of you watering in the middle of the day on a day when it starts to reach 40, and we got 43 degrees here just last week. This week. Remarkably, I haven't had any plants burnt. And I've got a lot of those, soft, fleshy cucumbers, zucchinis, and lettuce. But I was out watering in the middle of the day, just wetting the leaves. That's what they're telling you. And they're wilting and they're like pumpkins. I mean, they look like they're going to collapse and die and burn to a crisp, and they will if you don't hydrate them. And that burning has come about because they have been allowed to be dehydrated. So it really is important. You might have to get out there 4 or 5 times and give those leaves a bit of a wet. It doesn't take very long. It's only quick. I mean, I know it gets hot out there. Don a hat and a pair of sunglasses, and it might be a bit of a spray for the plants and one for you, which I did last week. It was that hot. But remarkably, at the end of the day, you'll save your plants. So please don't think that can't be done. Building things like structures or using things like arches to grow plants over the top, which I've done here. I mean, I know you can't see anything at the moment, but the next slides will be the proof in the pudding. Will provide, because, remember where I am. This is on the south wall. So this garden then it gets that hot afternoon sun once, from about midday all the way down to about 3 o'clock before it starts to, the sun starts to set as it gets lower into the sky. The house then shades that. But for the other part of the day, I really need shade. So what I've done is I've put arches in, and I've grown scarlet runner beans, which again are deciduous. They lose their leaves in winter, they die down and come back up in the springtime, and they are not only are they pretty, but they are very productive at the same time because they're beans you can eat whether you pick them young, and we pick those young and we let them get a little bit longer, and we use them in a scarlet runner bean pickle, which is fantastic. Or you can let them get really long and dry on the plant, and you can use those like berlotti beans. But the beauty is that when they die down, again, I get the use of the organic material to put in the compost, and it lets the warm winter sun back in to warm the garden back up. So, and as you can see on the right-hand side, the shade that's being cast by these arches, which has been fantastic. Again, it's been a bit of a saviour to cool down the garden. Shade, as I say, the more shade you can get built in your garden, the better. You might need, I've done this before, and I don't believe I've got a slide of it, but a couple of tomato stakes and had a stapler. You might have to get one of those timber staplers, not like a paper stapler, and get some shade cloth and staple the shade cloth to the tomato stakes, leaving the points, and you can actually poke those in the ground, and you can roll them up to suit whichever area you're trying to shade, in the afternoon sun. That's also another great way forward of being able to reduce the amount of sunlight that you're getting into your garden. Again, same deal. That's a kiwi fruit over the first arch. The other thing too is that your pots, most important, make sure that you mulch your pots. I think a lot of people forget the fact that pots dry out probably worse than they do in soil, with plants because they're elevated, number one. Number two, potting mix drains well. That's the whole idea of it. And that mulch layer stops that sun getting to it and/or helps retain a little bit more of that moisture before the drainage starts, so most important. This is the prime example. This is the zucchini in just last week. Pumpkin this is. This is one of those golden nugget pumpkins. Look at it. This is the point where I've got out there and thought, time to get out and water. Now, this is that same pumpkin later on that day. So you can see the difference. So don't be frightened of getting out there and watering. And I watered that probably 3 or 4 times that particular day, the day that I took that. So, it's vitally important that you do this, because if you don't, you'll lose them, and then you'll start to get sun scorch on the fruit that they're bearing, and that's the other thing you don't want. Big burnt patches on zucchinis or pumpkins or cucumbers and so forth, and that comes about because the leaves have been allowed to wilt to the point where it's let the sun in. The whole point of those, you see, these things are vines and they're meant to be grown in the shade. Ultimately, we stick them like I have out in the sun. I tried to get them to grow up through the apple tree, but they wanted to march towards the sun, so it was an impossibility for me to get them to grow them where I wanted them. But having said that, they've done quite well. But you still got to be mindful of the fact that not letting them wilt like on the left-hand side, get to them when you can. Now, if you're at work while this is happening, you might be time that you consider getting some automated irrigation. Now, you can see in the right-hand side there, I've got an impact sprinkler. I've actually, all of my garden are under irrigation, and I have them on a timer, which I can actually remotely control from my phone, no matter where I am. All I need is an internet connection, and I'm in. And it wasn't terribly dear. You can get to, in fact, Bunnings sell some of these. This is a beehive unit, B-HYVE is how it's spelt. I think it's an Orbit product. That's the controller, at least anyway. They're battery driven. You do need a dongle inside and an internet connection. That makes them Wi-Fi to the individual taps. But the system, once it's on Wi-Fi, is then on the internet that you can control. And I set these going first thing in the morning at different times for about 10 minutes every day. And intermittently, if I'm not at home and I know that they're likely to be wilting and the temperature's way up there, I might just open up the phone and hit the app and hit them for 10 minutes incrementally, during the course of the day. It can be a lifesaver. So it might be worth consideration. And they're child's play to use too. Use vertical space. That might provide you an opportunity to get some of those pots out of the heat, under some shade. You might use shade cloth instead of bird netting like I've done with these strawberries. And the irrigation is really easy because provided you cleverly fit one pot underneath the drainage holes of another, all you need to do is irrigate with dribblers, and it's just a 12mm poly pipe that you can buy. It's cheap. You can get them at plant nurseries. As I say, it's child play to put together. You don't need hardly any tools, a pair of secateurs and maybe a pair of pliers, but that's about all you need. It's sort of push, click and close, and it's done, and it's just snap lock fitting to the hose. So it's very easy to run out. And the dribbler has a gadget at the bottom where you can wind it in or wind it out and allow more or less water out of it. And it fills and flood fills the top pot. And as it drains, the water drains down through the pots below it, watering those as well, rather than you having to run, individual irrigation points to every pot. And as you can see, these do quite well. So that's another way of being able, as you can see on the right-hand side, another view of that. So again, those making good use of that vertical space is a good way forward. Again, this is on the south side, so it's remarkable how much stuff you can grow on the south side of walls that on the north side you're going to struggle, because that in the winter months okay, but in the summer months it becomes quite difficult to try and grow anything there because of the heat and the radiant. blistering heat that comes off those walls as they build. And the thing too is that day after day of heat, what happens is that those bricks warm up to the point where they don't get a chance to cool overnight. Particularly when you start to get mid-20s overnight, the house starts to heat up then. And that's one of the reasons why I say that, covering it with some greenery that's going to absorb that heat and reflect it, the house doesn't get that chance to heat up. And that's where the godsend in this is really. The south side's not so bad, but certainly the north or west or northwest walls, particularly if you can cover in greenery, you're going to be halfway there. Another great way forward is wicking beds. And these are self-watering pots or containers. They can be all sorts of things. I use one in the garden. It probably was visible in one of the slides, but I'm sure I've got some more here to show you. What happens is that the container you use must be able to hold water. And if it doesn't hold water, what you do is you put a liner in it to hold water, and you fill up the bottom of it with scoria. Now, the key to success in this is the soil depth. It must not exceed 30 centimetres. That's the point where the wicking effect stops. In fact, if you get the kids to get an A4 piece of paper and rule a line diagonally from one corner to another and measure up 30 centimetres and get them to dangle the point of that in a saucer of water, the water will wick up to just underneath or around about that 30 centimetre mark, and it won't go any further. And it does the same thing in soil. So if you were to have a 400 millimetre deep or 40 centimetre deep soil, you're going to not get the benefit. So anything less than 30 centimetres is ideal. Across the top of the scoria or volcanic rock, and I prefer that in the bottom of the wicking beds or pots, whichever you prefer, because it holds more water. Being volcanic, it's porous. Using things like quartz and the like, or blue metal, it's not porous, and whilst it'll hold a little bit of water, but nothing like the volcanic stuff, so you get much more in it. And you use a geotextile fabric, or sometimes you could use doubled over 75% shade cloth, draped over the top, tucked it into the corner so you cover the stones, and then you can fill it up with what I like is a 50-50 mix of good quality potting mix and homemade compost if you've got it. And you use a pipe in the corner or to one side so that you can poke a hose down into the bottom of the scoria and fill that up. I like to put a cap on the top of mine so that the mozzies can't get down into the bottom there and breed. And at the point where the scoria and the scoria stops and the soil starts, you need an overflow pipe drilled through whatever the container is, and that allows the water out once the container is filled at the bottom. That way, if it rains for the next 40 days and 40 nights, it's not going to wash all of your valuable soil out or your plants. The beauty is that once you plant the seedlings or plants in this soil, and you do need to mulch these, and you also need for the first week to 10 days to water them each day, then you can stop because the wicking effect will take over. The plants will be starting to make their way down in the soil with their new root systems, and away they go. And all you really need to do is to incrementally check about once a month or once every couple of weeks the depth of the water. And all you need to do is to walk past, pop the cap off, poke the hose down the top, let it run until the water runs out the bottom, and that's it. And it's remarkable on the really hot days where everything else is wilting, anything you're growing in these is absolutely standing bolt upright and laughing at the day. IBCs are a great way forward, particularly if you're looking for a solution for a larger wicking bed. They've already got the liner in them, whereas the fruit boxes or fruit crates, which I've got there on the right-hand side, they need a liner, and they're a lot more work and a little harder to get these days. These half food grade containers, and I suggest if you're going to use something that has had any sort of liquid in there, know where it's come from, know that it hasn't been toxic. Generally, a food substance of some sort's ideal. So just make sure where you're buying it, you can reliably find the information out that you're looking for. So cut in half, these have been turned into wicking pots, for want of a better word. These are modular ones on the right-hand side. You can buy these and you can fit these together so that they actually form one huge, big level. So again, quite expensive though in comparison. This is one of the community garden that I set up. This is one of the fruit crates that has a liner, and that holds over 350 litres of water, by the way. So you can imagine that doesn't need watering for quite some time. But as the plants grow and they get bigger and stronger and they start producing fruit, you'll find that they go through a lot more water, and particularly as the weather warms up again. So again, you really need sometimes to get past, just poke the hose in every so often, a little more often over the hotter months. On the right-hand side, as you can see, a great easy way of being able to install nets, particularly if you're in a fruit fly affected area. Unfortunately, we have that starting to run rife through Victoria these days, which is making edible gardening a little bit more difficult. So fortunately for here, we don't have it yet, but that's not to say in the not so distant future we won't get it. I'm sure we will. So just some conduit pushed down into the corners with some fruit fly netting over the top. Pretty easy solution. Might also keep off the pesky little white cabbage butterfly. Just bear in mind that some things need insect pollination. So if you're using insect net, you might find that that can be a bit counterproductive depending upon what you're growing. So just bear that in mind when you do it. Some of them have casters. Now, people that have got alfrescos that are struggling for space, these are an ideal solution where the alfrescos get rarely used until they invite the friends or the family over. So all of a sudden, there's a mass exodus to go clean the area up and make it spick and span, and nothing else much goes on there during the course of the year. If it's like our place, that's about what happens. And this allows you to grow things that you didn't have the room for. You unlock the casters and push it out your way and use the entertaining area, and then push these back in to use the space again. So it's a good way of being able to get some something to grow in some areas that haven't got soil at all, and be able to use it as a multi-purpose area. It might also be good in the hot days where you're able to wheel these things out of the hot sun into the shade. That's another great way of being able to utilise, this. And bear in mind, you can do that with pots. You can get casters for some of the larger tubs and so forth that you can buy these days, and they'll do likewise. You can push those around without breaking your back trying to shift them. So on the right-hand side, these are a couple of red gum. Actually, these are cypress wicking beds that someone's put together. So it's, again, raised beds, particularly if you've got the bad back as I have these days. So having things up a bit higher for me is a great thing. And I'm sure as people get older, they'll love these. And wicking beds, again, so for those of you who are time poor or a bit forgetful, this is a good way forward. This is my wicking bed in the backyard. I always companion plant them. So whatever goes well on the plate together goes well on the ground together. It's one of my catch cries. So tomatoes, basil and garlic, so I always plant those together. Always a marigold. But again, it's quite attractive, and it's remarkable on the really hot days where all the other tomatoes are wilting and being caned by the sun. Unless I get out there and water them, this guy, it's bowled upright. It doesn't even look like it's even seeing the hot day, because the plants are able to wick up the water as they need it, not when we think they need it. And that's the difference. If the water is available in the water table below them, they're able to get in touch with it, which is kind of good. Use aspects to your advantage. Some of those really hot spots will be ideal positions to be able to grow things that you otherwise ordinarily might not be able to grow. Things like bavaco, which this is a champagne fruit. They grow to about 1 foot long. That's in my backyard. That's on the north end wall of the house. It's at the far end of the house, and that's grown to about 3 metres tall. We get about 50 to 70 of these wonderful tropic banana yellow fruits. They sort of taste a little bit across of a honeydew and a pineapple, sort of. They've got a wonderful, wonderful flavour. But avocados, some of the dwarf avocados and so forth will do well in those, particularly the spots where they've got a nice warm brick wall, and the overnight low temperatures are what generally does the harm with avocados. So, you know, that radiant warm brick wall will radiate that warmth down, particularly over the cooler months. You know, but over the summer months, they'll thrive. Things like bananas. Now, there's a cool climate banana, one of the Cavendish varieties. You can get those down here. Just make sure, though, that when you plant it, it's going to march north. So be aware of that, because they grow new pups each year, and what happens is that you cut down the mother tree and let one of the pups grow, and what ultimately happens is you'll plant it at one point in the yard, and it will march north towards another point in the yard as it grows. But they're a bit of fun, and I've seen them even here in Werribee, and we get frosts here. If you give them the right aspect, they will produce. You know, so Tamarillos are another one that is a fine choice for these sorts of aspects. Those nice, warm, radiant brick walls where you otherwise probably couldn't grow other things. You know, so it really is very important to consider what you've got. You know, deciduous trees, particular. I know that we sort of talk about natives and so forth quite a lot, but in the suburbs, deciduous trees have a huge benefit, and the benefit is such that you get the benefit of the shade in the warmer months, and you get the benefit of the leaves to compost and turn back into soil. And in the winter months, and let that warm sunlight back into the house to warm it up. So you're not only saving water bills, shading the soil and garden, stopping that evaporation, saving some money on water, but you're also saving some money on power at the same time. Instead of having to use air conditioning, you're not also turning on the heater near as much, because you've got that warm winter sun coming back in. It might be a window, it might be a wall, so give those sorts of things a bit of consideration. Grow a fruit tree, grow some espalier fruit trees. If you take up the World Health recommendations, that you should be eating 5 serves of vegetables and 2 pieces of fruit each day. And of course, if you that's a lot of fruit to buy every year. 730 pieces per person per head that live under your roof. So, if you've got the spot, and we're looking for those 3 to 5 trees that we should be looking for to see if we can't grow on our own property. Maybe you've got a hot wall or window that you might be able to cool down and shade by putting a frame up away from it, but growing a fruit tree in front of it, and get the benefit of both worlds. You not only get the fruit tree, but you get the shade benefit and the cooling potential and the warmth in the winter. So it's a win-win. If I can just bear with me, I'll zoom in on this tree here. This is a multiple grafted tree. I put 12 varieties on this, so I grafted each one. So every branch on this tree is different, and I get about 6 months worth of picking out of it. You might also notice that I've got rhubarb growing beneath it. Again, one of those catch cries of mine. What goes well on the plate together goes well in the ground together. So apple and rhubarb on the plate go really well. And surprise, surprise, the apple gives the shade the rhubarb needs. It's got wide leaves, and of course, there's a symbiotic relationship also had in soil. But this allows me quite a long period of picking. So we start picking in January, and we finish picking in around about June, July, with Granny Smith being the last one picked off the tree. Get about 20 to 25 apples per branch, spread over that 6-month period, which is pretty good. So you can espalier, and it doesn't necessarily need to be fruit trees. You can espalier camellias. You can espalier all sorts of different things. It's just basically making them 2-dimensional, trained against a frame, the width or the height, or the width and the height of a window that might be, causing you grief in this hot time of the year, I think personally is a great solution. Bearing in mind keeping them at a manageable height, because you've got to be easy to net these trees, pick fruit and prune them. You don't want to be doing that off ladders. There's that tree again without its leaves. So this is what I'm trying to say. In the summer months, full of leaves and full of fruit, and in the winter months, no leaves and allowing that sun back in. But there are the varieties I talked about before. So, and if you come down to Werribee Park, we can show you how to do all of this sort of stuff. This is a pear tree, so it doesn't make any difference. The frames are all the same. It's just the shape that you decide and desire to grow. You can be quite artistic if you want to go down that path. This happens to be a pear tree. So you can imagine that perched in front of a nice bedroom window that might get quite hot in summer, to have something like this in front of it, shading and sheltering that window from the hot sun. And then in the winter months, when there's no leaves, you've got this pretty shape, artistic looking tree in front of it. And I might add that these sorts of trees add huge value to properties, even though people probably don't think it, but I can assure you they do. Think about harvesting water. You know, we capture a lot of water off our roofs. Put in water tanks where you can, if you possibly can. I mean, there's no better water than rain. And we water by hand. I mean, you may need to put pumps in. It just depends on your budget. We've got water tanks in a couple of spots. We don't harvest near as much as we probably could have. I'd run out of space is my problem. We even harvest the water off the chook's roof. So that blue container down there harvests the water that runs off into the gutter, and that actually waters through little feeders, water as we call them, that are float activated. So as the chooks drink from the water, it fills back up because it activates the float. So you can be, you know, even though it's not saving a great deal of money, but it's more if they're getting fantastic water that doesn't have, you know, anything in it. It's remarkable. And it surprises me just how much difference rainwater you collect makes versus tap water on plants. It is quite incredible. In fact, when we're using biostimulants, things like worm teas or compost teas or sea sols or any of those, liquid golds or Eco Butch or any of those, we use the rainwater tanks to water that in with, and the plants love it. So, as I said before, considering irrigation, I do have a little bit of drip left in the garden around the trees and on the half pots on the fence, but I've actually gone back to overhead watering for a number of reasons. The problem with drip irrigation in large beds that have got multi-species plants in them is that they're very hit and miss. You get a lot of competition in the soil and limited amount of water spread or coverage with drip irrigation, and a lot of plants miss out. And when you do some checking, you'll find that it really hasn't done what you think it's doing. And sure, it stops evaporation, but at the end of the day, evaporation happens anyway. With this overhead impact sprinkler, I have seen a remarkable difference since I've applied this and some of the methods that I'm using in the yard. And I've only got two of these, one at the other end of the yard, and it does the whole of most of our garden. And you see, leaves are uniquely designed to capture and collect water and deliver them directly to the feeder roots of the plants. Drip irrigation doesn't do that. And of course, there's dust, silt, and bacteria that lands on plants' leaves. And when it rains, and most of the plants that we grow, if you're not native, most of the plants that we grow that are ornamental or edible are not from here, and they enjoy much more often rainfall where they're native to than here. So the water, because it doesn't rain as much as it should, the water is never washed. The stomata, the breathing cells on the plant's leaves, are not washed and cleansed of that dust and the silt that builds on them, and nor is the bacteria washed down onto soil where it's meant to land. So since I've been using overhead, holy moly, what a difference. So give it some thought. It may not, and don't necessarily use this particular type. It suits the application that I've got. There are many different types of arrays and arrangements that you'll be able to use depending upon the space, the width and the length of your area that you want to cover. But yeah, they've been a godsend, to be honest. And this is the timer that I talked about before, the Beehive timer. I don't use. I've never ever touched the controller as such. It's all been controlled via my phone. So it's not something you have to fiddle about and try and learn how to use or what have you. No, it's been fantastic. So it's very, very easy. Set and forget basically, and then log in and water it manually as you please. It also sets you into rain delay, or when there's a frost, it detects all of that sort of stuff because it appears at the Bureau of Meteorology, which is kind of good. So if you've had rain, it will know that and will set you in a rain delay so you're not overwatering your garden. Mulch, again, extremely important to make sure that you mulch your garden. I talked about this before. Not only does it stop the evaporation, but it keeps a blanket on the ground for the soil food web to continue doing its important work, not allowing the microbes to die off and so on. So make sure that you shouldn't have soil uncovered anywhere, anytime. It's vitally important. If you can make your own compost, I sieve my compost about once a month or once a fortnight, and I wander around and I just simply broadcast it between the leaves on the plants and water it off immediately. That builds wonderful humus. Now, I talked about humus a little earlier, and I'll come to that. Just allow me to whip through this quickly because I'm starting to run out of time. Feeding your soil from above with that sifted compost, which is what I'm doing here. I've sieved the compost, broadcasting it amongst the plants, and I only do a couple of square meters at a time and water it so that the compost makes its way off the plants down into the soil, in through the mulch, and the soil food web of insects, worms, and so forth do the rest. So we should be feeding the soil like a forest floor always from above, rather than be turning it in, because when you turn the soil over, you start to liberate the carbon that's been stored in there and it gets back oxidized and put back up into the atmosphere, which is where we don't want it. And the soil food web is allowed to stay doing what it's meant to do. And if we keep feeding the floor from above, you'll get great humus results. And what you'll get is more of these guys. These guys make this wonderful substance humus 4 times faster than any other decomposition process we know. There's a huge water holding capacity. And if you can increase your water holding capacity in the soil, it's happy days. I mentioned this before. It should have 5% humus in it. We've managed to diminish it down to 1.5%. If you can increase it by 1% more humus, you do that by that method I was talking about, broadcasting small amounts of compost once a month or so on, and encouraging more worms. They make it 4 times faster. Every square metre of your soil you will increase by 17 litres of more water holding capacity than it could hold before, down to about 200 millimetres deep. You can get that back to 5% in your soil. That's 85 litres. Every square metre of your soil will hold down 200 millimetres deep. Now, that's something to aim for, I can assure you. The composting worms, don't confuse the two. Composters, they're great, but they don't do the deep digging that we talked about before with those bigger worms. And a good worm population is about 25 per shovelful. So please don't go digging and counting worms. That's going to be counterproductive. If you haven't got a worm farm, get one. Councils reback them. Keep them near your kitchen door so you're feeding them often. You'll get the castings, which you can mix with the sifted compost, and now you've got an absolute superfood that costs you nothing other than your waste, to put back into the ground. And then, of course, you've got the liquids to use as a biostimulant when you're watering in your plants. Bearing in mind, soil composition is made up of 25% air and 25% water, and that 5% humus. If you can get that humus in there, you keep feeding keeping the aeration going, because you've got worms aerating your soil, you're going to get good infiltration, and you're not going to have the evaporation that a lot of us get because we haven't got good healthy soil. So it all starts with soil. Look, I'm going to skip through these because there's a lot to talk about and we're running out of time. But the air is another important component, because every breath you take is 78% nitrogen, and of course plants need nitrogen to grow, and the microbes solubilize the nitrogen out of the air and make it available to the plants. So you don't want compaction. That's why I say that humus and the water infiltration and the worms aerating the soil for you doing what they've always done will get you the free nitrogen that is available that we mostly don't get. High and low pressure systems drive a lot of what takes place in our soil, and a high pressure system is heavy sinking air, and a low pressure system is light rising air. So what happens is, and remembering that 78% of air is nitrogen, in the high pressure systems, that's that heavy sinking air, provided you haven't got compaction, it pushes that air down to about 200 psi, pounds per square inch, making it available to the microbes. And the microbes solubilize it and make it available to the plant's roots. The low pressure system, light rising air, lifts up things called aerosols up into the atmosphere, and that's what forms the nucleus for rain to form. And when we get that wrong, we sort of muck things up, unfortunately. Well, I've got to the end, or very close to the end. If you aren't following me, you can by going to my website and catching my daily posts. They're free each day at craigcastry.com.au. And just before I start and take some questions, on the 15th of February in Wyndham Park Community Centre in Werribee, and it's only about 30 minutes out from the CBD, come along and you will learn the secrets of healthy soil. I've only just briefly touched on some of it tonight, and it's remarkable when you get your soil right, you get absolutely everything else right. The health of the soil ultimately affects, believe it or not, our own health. If you grow healthy soil, if you've got healthy soil and you grow healthy plants in it, and when you consume them, you get the health they're meant to give you. But when you're not growing in healthy soil, and 99.9% of our food is not grown in healthy soil, we're not getting from our food what we're meant to. And the hospitals, unfortunately, are full of people that probably shouldn't be in there because of what they're not getting in their food. I mean, it's more complex than that, but you hear where I'm going. So come and learn the secrets of healthy soil. It's a free event. It starts at 10:30 and it finishes at 11:30. So get along. I'm sure that there will be a link. There is a link to this at the bottom of this slide, but I'm sure we'll make that available in some correspondence with you. Of course, these are I alluded to this earlier, that I'm the author of these 6 books, and my website is the place to get them. Or come and see me in person on the 15th. Save you some postage and handling. Well, with that, that's the end of my presentation, Rhoda. So we'd perhaps better wander through some Q&A.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions in chat box. Do you want me to read, or you can go through it?
I can read, I guess. I'll just stop sharing. There we go. Okay, so where is the chat? They've changed this on the great presentation. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so I'll go to the top. How do grapes cope with the latest heat wave? No problem at all. Bear in mind, I've been looking after soil, so it's vitally important. What about competition from understory plants? That's the beauty. You see, the feeder roots of trees don't mind the competition. I mean, and there is a symbiotic relationship because they're different species. So that's something that's worth investigating and trying out for yourself. I mean, if you saw the health of my fruit trees and the amount of production that we get from growing plants beneath them, it's mind-boggling. It really is. How do you stop possums and rats from eating your plants? Well, I've got 2 Jack Russells, so that's the dogs chase them. Look, I do have occasional problem with possums. I don't have any problems with rats, and yet I've got chooks. So I think it's a case of not feeding them as best you can, not leaving scraps about. Don't leave dog food out. Don't put meat scraps and so forth or food items into compost. Use feeders, proper chicken feeders, so that my feeders in the chook yard, the chooks have to stand on a treadle for the lid to pop up, and then the chooks can get in and get their food. And when they step off the treadle, the lid closes, and then the other birds can't get in there to flick the seed or to get the seed. So there is in one of my books, or 2 of my books actually, Edible Gardens: A Practical Guide. There is a molasses spray that you can spray, that it's not harmful to the environment nor you or the plants, that you can mix up and spray on the plants that are being affected, and they don't like it and they tend to stay away. So that might be another one to have a look. Oh yeah, there's the soils workshop. Thank you very much. What are good combinations of plant species to grow together? Tomatoes, basil. Think about what goes on the plate together. So we're in the salad season, and it's not too late. You can still put in a tomato or two. Put in the smaller cherry types. They'll quickly get along in the ground. So tomatoes, spring onions, beetroot, cucumbers, different types of lettuce. Always a marigold with a tomato, because marigold flowers are edible, but the marigolds keep the nematodes, the microscopic worms, away from the roots on the tomatoes. Even a cucumber are in that group, but only one tomato, and circle it with those others. So that's a few. Corn, you can still put corn in, corn seedlings. I wouldn't worry about trying to start them from seed now. Corn, beans, and cucumbers. They call those the three sisters. Does compost need heaps of sunshine? No. It will heat up itself. It's done with heat. I cold compost. I don't hot compost, which means that I'm not turning the thing over all the time. And I build them in layers, 1 to 3 parts. 1 part brown or low nitrogen layer, 3 parts green or high nitrogen layers. So food scraps and lawn clippings and green waste is high nitrogen or green material. The brown stuff is dried leaves, straw, hay, cardboard, paper. That's the low nitrogen. So 1 to 3, and I'd build those in layers. And I just bandicoot from the bottom, get a shovel underneath at the bottom of the level, and that's where the stuff is pretty well finished. Put it through the sieve, and that separates the stuff that's finished from the stuff that isn't. And the stuff that isn't, that doesn't go through the sieve easily, I throw back on the heap to continue doing its breaking down. So that's it. Thank you, Craig. Presentation reinforces what I know and inform me. Oh, it's small, I didn't know. Do you put worms in wicking beds? No, they get themselves in there themselves. Funnily enough, every year without fail, I have to get down that long side near where the grapes are. I have to get a ladder up, and for some reason the gutter doesn't quite drain in the middle, and grass grows there. And without fail, once a year, every year, I have to get up there, and I get up there and I grab the grass by the roots, and I pull it up, and lo and behold, guess what's in the gutter? Worms. Now, I don't know how they got there, but every year, without fail, they're there. So I can assure you, if you've got organic matter and you've got a little bit of compost and a little bit of mulch into that wicking bed, the worms will make their way in without fail. You don't need to put them in there. You don't need to put them in the garden either. There are heaps and heaps of worms that will be sitting down low in the cool clay if you've got no organic matter. And the minute you provide them some food, they will make their way up to get that food. So it's a case of, build it and they will come. So thank you so much. Very informative. Quite certain. Do you put up shade cloth in heat waves? If so, what percentage? Between 50 and 75%. Often it's just whatever I've got, to be honest. It's often more 50% than anything else, but any shade cloth is better than none if you've got a really hot. And it's sometimes not necessarily just the sun that you're looking to break. The wind can do just as much damage, if not more, on those really hot days than the sun does. So to form a wind barrier to break that, that gusting wind, can do the same thing. So sometimes the shade cloth will help do that. So we're in a front tire area, and advice is not to plant under eaves or near the house. Do you have any suggestions on how I could create more shade on the house, please? Hard question. Not necessarily hard question, but you want to plant things that have glossy green leaves, things like camellias. If it's on the hot, did you say on the hot side? High prone area, not to plant under the eaves, or so there are plenty of European ornamental plants, things like petunias and the like, you can espalier and grow in that 2-dimensional shape, keeping them down. So, and they don't have to be right up against the house. They can be some distance back, couple of metres back from them, to still provide you that benefit. and still not pose a fire threat. I mean, natives are explosive. You know, things like eucalypts and melaleucas and grevilleas and so forth, the saps are just, once they dry out, you know, it's like fuel on the fire. So, whereas these more harder leaved, glossy plants tend to repel fire. They'll still get burnt, but they're not like the natives are. So that's something I would look up if I were you. It's something I might do some more work on down the track. I'm starting to do more presentations out in the bush these days as well. So, yes, hot side, yeah. So that's that. So okay. So having said that, then maybe you've got to look at some of the thicker growing deciduous trees. You know, something like maybe like quince would be maybe a. So think about that. Quince, even apples. They're not, you know, they're, as I say, they'll still burn, but they're nothing like natives. And I think that's the thing. I mean, that advice is good sound advice, but at the end of the day, you know, they can be much. It's better that the embers catch the trees than the house. So anyway. What mulch do I use? Well, I have used quite a few over the years, but the one that I'm very happy with at the moment is called Who Flung Dung, all one word, WHOFLUNGDUNG. Comes in bales, comes from a company called Nutrog. I don't align myself with any company, so but it's activated and it's a wonderful mulch. If your budget allows, it's very, very good. It's bioactive. It's certified organic, and that's important. There's lots of stuff out there that's available, but if it's not certified organic, then how do you know it hasn't had, you know, glyphosate or something sprayed on it? And that's, you don't want that, particularly when you're growing edibles, and I certainly don't. So it's important to know where it's come from, and that certification I think is pretty valuable. And it comes in a bale. It doesn't go. It's not super expensive, but it doesn't go quite as far as something like a pea straw or a sugarcane would do. But I find that it's 3 times better. So yeah, try that and see. How much would I use? About 20 to 25 millimeters depth. And once you've got it on, you know, by the time, and it's quite a lovely dark colour. You probably noticed that in the people look at it and go, oh, you haven't got any mulch in your soil. Oh, yes, I have. That is the mulch. That's the colour of it. It's a dark chocolate brown colour, and it comes from organic chicken farms over in South Australia, and it's broken down and inoculated with a product called Encase, which is a particular bacteria and fungal strain that makes it bioactive. So when you start to apply it, you can see these fine white mycelium threads and strands through it, which is music to my ears when I see that. That's fantastic. I know firsthand that this is going to be good stuff. It stinks a little bit, like a manure smell, chook smell for the first couple of days, but that's a good thing. And once you water it in, you'll find that smell will go away, and you'll soon start to see the benefits of what you've applied. It's worth having for sure. So. Okay, well, I think that's we've got to the end. Rada, thank you very much for your assistance tonight. I hope that everyone has had a great time tonight, and we've at least been able to deliver some way forward to navigate better planting out your gardens and so forth. And I hope to see you on the next one. Please come along to the day on the 15th. It'll be a great eye opener, I'm sure, if you get along. So. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you so very much, Craig, for your excellent presentation. And I hope everyone enjoyed it and it is useful for them as well. And I would like to thank all the participants for being here. Thank you so much.
No worries. All the best. Thank you very much. Bye for now.